Hello and welcome to our Water Loss Specialist Group webinar series. We've got a special one today. It's all about water loss in the United States of America. So we're very grateful to have Ann Dickinson with us, Will Jernigan, Alan Wyatt and Matt Collings. So today we're going to get an overview of the landscape we have in America, in the United States with Ann. After that, we'll hear something about the AWWA audits from Will Jernigan, two very experienced people in water loss. And to add a very third experienced person, we've got Alan Wyatt, who will give us a case study from California. And then our second Californian case study will come from Matt Collings today. At the end of these four presentations, we're going to have some questions and answers. So please, as we go through these presentations, so you don't forget them, please put your questions in the chat and we'll have a fair bit of time for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to hand over first to Ann Dickinson. She was one of the founder members of the Water Loss Specialist Group, so I think she'll talk a little bit about that. And she kind of really introduces this set of webinars today, these presentations. Mary, over to you.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're very happy to have you with us today. And yes, I am one of the founding members of the Water Loss Specialist Group. It had been originally a task force within the Efficient Urban Water Management Specialist Group at International Water Association. And that task force got so busy and did so much great work and was holding its own conferences, and we finally broke it out into its own specialist group around 2010 or so. So I'm very pleased to still be working with IWA there. But my job today is to just introduce the topic of water loss management in the United States, and specifically to talk about what laws, policies, and regulations have been adopted in the United States since the beginning of all of our water loss work in the new performance indicators. So let's just start from the beginning. As Alan Lambert knows, who's on this webinar with us, there was a task force that he chaired that came up with a whole series of new ways to document where water was going in the system, better methods of auditing and performance benchmarking. And the American Water Works Association in the US did participate in this task force. We did send a member there, so we were very aware of all of the great work that Alan was leading at that time. We were very interested in the water balance, the audit methodology that was being proposed. We were suffering in the United States with a lot of fictionalized water loss accounting that was going on in water utilities all throughout the United States. So the Water Loss Control Committee at the American Water Works Association, which already had existed at that point in time, it recognized the significance of these new protocols that were being developed, largely led by the UK, but also others around the world, Roland Limburger, Bambos Charalambos, lots of others who are working on this. And so the American Water Works Association Water Loss Control Committee published in their journal a committee report in August of 2003, fully endorsing this new methodology and these performance indicators, and urging water utilities to change their accounting methodology. So some of the recommendations were, first of all, yes, we endorse this new methodology and the standardization of terms. We are going to define those here in the US as best practices and encourage all utilities to use them. We also want to see state policies and regulatory requirements enacted that would standardize uniform water loss accounting, and especially active water loss control. And so as part of that, the Water Loss Control Committee initiated through AWWA a state survey project in 2002, which found that only 33 of the 50 states had any kind of water loss policies. And where they did have policies, they were mostly specifying maximum levels of unaccounted for water percentages. And those percentages ranged from 7.5% as the maximum you could have to up to 20%. And that would be a state standard for how much unaccounted for water you could have in your system. Only 13 states at that time required any kind of system auditing with no requirements or standards for how that should be done. So the report in this 2003 article, basically it said, okay, we need to change. Stop using percentages as your metric. It's not an accurate metric. Stop using the term unaccounted for water. We need to move toward these new, better, more accurate methods. And so the final recommendation was that we should be refining our auditing methods for both top-down and bottom-up audits. And Will Jernigan will talk to you quite a bit about how that wonderful work happened in the US. So we've had 20 years of progress since that 2002 first state survey. The American Water Works Association has operating manuals for all kinds of water utility issues, and the M36 manual is the water loss manual. And that was updated with the new IWA methodology in 2005. So that became standard best practice for water utilities in terms of the guidance from the American Water Works Association. Water audit software was then released, and again, we'll talk to you more about that. And that's now become AWWA policy. So there was time to do another survey after 20 years to take a look at what had happened in the states since 2002. And so a survey was launched and published in January 2022 and did include Canada as well. And so the results of this survey showed great progress in the United States and also in Canada, requiring this new water loss methodology and policy, many more than over the 2002 state survey findings. And there's a link to the report. I know you probably can't access it in the recording, but I'd be happy to send this PowerPoint deck out to anybody who will want to access the link. So what did the survey find? The survey had a 77% response rate, which is for surveys is a very good rate. We had 48 states that actively participated. And what we found was 12 states and 1 Canadian province require regular water loss auditing under the M36 manual rules, and with mandated reporting to state agencies. 4 states and 1 Canadian province, in addition to that, further required M36 water loss auditing to have some kind of data validity assessment. And then the final star group was 4 states and 1 Canadian province, in addition to those 2, further required third-party validation of utility M36 water loss audits. And that would basically cover about 1,000 systems in the United States, according to the survey. So what the survey has found is that 40% of states were using the water audit methodology, including the 3 most populous states, California, Texas, and Florida, covering 91 million people. But we still had 32 agencies still using unaccounted for water percentages. This is an unhappy finding, and we are, as a group, all motivated to turn that around. So here's a visual representation of what those results were. You'll see the dark blue states and then Quebec province up in Canada are the ones that had the best level 1 validation of the audits, M36 water balance properly completed. And then those with just a data validity assessment were the strong crosshatch ones, and then the lighter crosshatch ones were self-reporting for whatever the data validity would be. And so you can see that we still have a fair amount of work to do with all the rest of the states. It is still AWWA best practice to do this correctly, but what we want to do is get the states all aligned into requiring the new methodology as well. Also, there was another state analysis done in 2022, later on in the year, by the Alliance for Water Efficiency, an organization I used to run. And it does a state scorecard every 5 years and compares and ranks all 50 states as to what they achieve in various different water efficiency categories. And water loss control is one of those examined areas of ranking. And what they found is in 2022, 23 states weren't regulating water loss at all. But the good news is that 27 states were, and that's a larger number. And so here's also a link to that report if you want to take a look. They have a different kind of map, but it's basically the same kind of thing, which shows the star states in the dark blue. And then, of course, the white states are the ones that don't limit water loss at all and don't require reporting. So again, this points to the fact that we still have work to do. So I just want to finish by just talking about some recent state developments. The California State Water Resources Control Board has issued a regulation that mandates compliance by 2028 with real loss performance standards for all urban retail water systems. These are customized targets for real loss reduction. And as far as we can tell, California is the first state in the United States to do this. New Jersey has proposed a water loss audit requirement, which may be finalized by the end of this year. Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission has developed a similar proposal in 2022, but it's still under review, so we don't have news there. And then finally, the state of Texas has done quite a bit. In 2023, they established thresholds for what apparent loss and real loss compliance should look like. And you can see in the slide here what they are. You know, apparent loss and also real loss based on how many service connections they had per mile. So if you had 32 or more service connections per mile, the water loss threshold was 30 gallons per connection per day. But if you had less service connections, it was a higher threshold of 57 gallons per connection per day. And level 1 validations are now required as of January 1st, 2025. So Texas is now the 5th state to require this, adding to the survey. So final thoughts, more states, we all believe, need to pay attention to water loss management and set requirements for using these state-of-the-art tools, for which we will always be grateful for Alan Lambert's work. Percentages, we need to get rid of them. They should no longer be used in current audit methodology. They aren't now, but state regulators and the media seem to still love to talk about percentages. And so we need to get them to abandon percentages too. I come from the water efficiency world. So water efficiency programs, I firmly believe, should always include water loss management strategies in a very integrated way with their consumer programs. So that's an integrated utility strategy. So I continue to promote that. And then finally, saving water saves energy. There's a lot of embedded energy in water supply delivery. And we have proven that water loss management programs can show they saved energy and therefore they reduce carbon emissions, and that's quantifiable. IWA Water Loss Specialist Group had a terrific leakage emissions task force that took a look at this. There's the link to their work. And again, we're happy to share this so that you can take a look at that work. And then just to close, IWA is having a water efficiency conference in Melbourne, Australia in September. The 16th to the 18th of September, we will have a water loss track as we always do in this conference. So we urge you to attend and come and support it. And then finally, the North American Water Loss Conference is going to be held in December of this year in Louisville, Kentucky. This is held every 2 years in the United States and is a big gathering of the water loss faithful. And we also encourage you to consider coming to that as well. So thank you for listening to me. And here's my contact information. If you want to get in touch with me or get a copy of the slide deck, I'd be happy to share it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Really appreciate that. Okay, so that's brilliant. And there's some good questions so I've got after that that we'll talk about at the end. It looks great that we've got some good progress, Texas being an example. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit later why we're not seeing the progress and perhaps some of the other areas that we'd like to see on there. So that's brilliant. Okay, Will, if you'd like to share your screen, we'll hand over to you now. And obviously, those that know Will know that he's very passionate about the AWWA audits. So I think we're going to get a bit more detail on that from yourself. So take it away, Will.
All right, thank you very much, Mary Ann. Great start to this discussion. What I'm going to be discussing in my segment is the evolution of the water audit and data validation methodologies in North America. And so I'll kind of pick up, Mary Ann started a big picture from a policy perspective and how that's evolved over the last 25 to 30 years here. So from there, I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to do so by first highlighting a few of the drivers that have been relevant in pressing some of these methodologies forward and pushing forward some of the policy and regulatory developments that Mary Ann discussed. Drought is a big one. Strain on supply certainly has been created landmark events, such as in Georgia in the late 2000s. There was a significant drought that ultimately led to statewide legislation that mandated water conservation practices, including best practices for auditing and validation, and then ultimately water loss performance targets. And so that sort of set in motion many other things that may have ended up having relevance in California, Texas, and many other places. The interesting thing about drought is it's not just something that the arid states in the West get to keep all to themselves. We're now experiencing drought in places such as New England and Maine, the Great Lakes area, the places that we would maybe typically associate with having plentiful amounts of water. There's really no place that's immune from these issues. Another driving factor is public relations and public perception. There certainly is no shortage of these types of stories that we see in the media, but this oftentimes is helping to drive and inform policy and practices that ultimately are affecting what's happening on a state-by-state basis. Another big driver that we are seeing and have seen is from a financial perspective, the credit rating agencies that establish the credit worthiness of water utilities in North America are specifically looking at how well they are managing water loss. And more importantly, they are dialing in on if the water utilities are subscribing to the best practices as presented by AWWA and the M36 method. So this happened a few years back, and we're now seeing cases where systems are getting the ups and downs of this, where they'll be downgraded because of increase in water losses and lack of management, but also other cases where they're upgraded because of improvements in leakage and adoption of these practices. So seeing some real world impacts of this. I'll mention just operationally, utilities are paying more attention to this. And of course, we all know this famous cartoon. From a supply perspective, the most available water is the water that we already have. And so all of these things, I mentioned and introduced these potential drivers: drought, finance, operations, public perception, public relations. They've all really informed these methodologies that have been evolving over the last 25 to 30 years in North America. Of course, as Mary Ann said, around the early 2000s, AWWA was part of the task force in adopting the international water balance, and that sort of set in motion many things. What I'm going to dial in on specifically today, I'll just highlight that the M36 methodology, as captured in the Manual 36, which is the reference document developed by American Water Works Association, is really driving towards the cost effectiveness of managing loss. And that is built on sort of these rational and strategic steps: having a baseline, having that regular practice of annual audit, understanding the technical disaggregation of those issues, understanding the cost impacts, and then ultimately making our intervention decisions once we have that foundational understanding, versus skipping to the end and saying we're going to do a bunch of X, be it leak detection, be it buying equipment, being replacing all our meters, replacing all our pipes, installing a bunch of things. Our chance of being cost effective, if we have not gone through the rational steps before making those decisions, is much lower. So the M36 method is meant to help utilities get to this economic optimum, where we understand that we're not on the reactive end, where we're only fixing things when they break, and we're not on the aggressive end, where we're replacing assets before their useful life is up. And so we're finding this sort of this optimal. This economic principle, I think many folks are familiar with it, so it's at the heart of the M36 method. What I want to do now is to switch to the evolution of the free water audit software, because that has gone along with the evolution of the M36 manual. The manual of practice describes what you should do and how. The software has always meant to be a companion tool with that. And it was decided in the mid-2000s to put out the first freely available national tool, national software. The original version was very rudimentary. It did not have any quantification of data reliability or data validity, and it was real basic. There were some iterations around 2010, or that was in 2005. Around 2010, version 4 came out, and it first introduced the concept of grading the data and doing so on a structured rubric with scores for individual grades and then a composite score out of 100. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Version 5 came out in 2014. This had a couple of steps forward in the evolution. And then version 6, which is the current version that is out and available and being used in North America, came out in 2020, so about 5 years ago. Version 6 had a significant evolution in how the user interacts with, specifically around the assessment of data validity. This is a snapshot of the interface where users provide their inputs such as volume, system data, and cost data. So that fundamentally hasn't changed, and that's been fairly consistent. It's basically how do you build a water balance? You got your volumes in, your authorized consumption, your estimation of apparent losses, and then your system data and cost data allow key performance indicators to be calculated. What version 6 and the current version that's out has put into the industry that I think has been a significant evolutionary step forward is an interactive data grading function where the user answers a series of questions regarding their operations and their management of data. And then the tool develops the grade for that particular input. The one we're looking at here deals with volume from own sources. And so you can see that the questions pertain to things that are relevant to how reliable that data might be. First and foremost, are we metered? I hope all systems are, and certainly we want to be heading in that direction if you're not metered on any of your supplies. But then getting to what are the maintenance practices around those meters, how often are they tested volumetrically for accuracy, how often are they calibrated for signal integrity, what are the results of those tests, those maintenance practices, how often is the data reviewed and scrutinized for anomalies or issues that may happen, say, between the meter and the archiving and the SCADA. Data can get lost, signal integrity between those two, null values, anything that can affect ultimately the integrity of the totalization of supply from the year. So all of these are examples, and the user is interfacing with these. And then that gets to a few things that are presented back as outcomes for the user's interface in the free water audit software. Data validity is in the top left, and it is ultimately each input gets a grade, and 1 to 10, 10 being the highest level of reliability, 1 being the lowest. And then a composite score is the outcome of that. And that score can land anywhere between 1 and 100, and it really is meant to provide a measure of how overall how reliable the results of the audit are. I will pause here and maybe put this side by side, because outside of North America, the common practice, the best practice, and currently used practices for confidence limits. And so this was a decision that was made kind of early on in North America to go with this path instead of the confidence limits. It's not necessarily to say that confidence limits aren't useful, but this is sort of another way to put on a scale how reliable the audits are. So this ultimately is meant to guide the water utility on where should my next steps be focused. And if I'm in the middle of this spectrum of reliability, or let's say if I'm on the low end, it's way too soon to be doing target setting, benchmarking. The only thing I need to be focused on is improving data reliability. If I'm on the high end, I really need to be focused on reducing losses. If I'm in the middle, I probably need to be focusing on both of those things to some degree. So I'll mention one last piece about the free water audit software, and this is hot off the press. Mary Ann mentioned that saving water also saves energy, and that the leakage emissions initiative from IWA came out with a committee report or a white paper AWWA in North America has adopted that, and we are next week publishing an updated version to the free water audit software that incorporates the carbon calculation. And a couple of components I'll just highlight here just to give this a tease and make folks aware that this is something that's coming out. That the water utility can use the established leakage emissions initiative method to determine their carbon balance. And so here we have the water balance with the carbon emissions associated with it presented side by side. And the key thing here is looking at what are our total level of real losses, what are the total level of emissions in metric tons associated with that, identifying through component analysis and target setting exercise, how much leakage can we reduce, or are we aiming to reduce? And this tool now makes it easily available to quantify the carbon emission savings that would be associated with that. So that's something that we're very excited about, and we'll be publishing that next week, just ahead of the AWWA annual conference. So now I'm going to pivot for my kind of final segment to talk about data validation. So I want to distinguish the terms here. We talk about grading data in the audit. That speaks to validity. It's inherent reliability. Is this number more reliable or less reliable? The concept of validation refers more to the process, the bigger picture process of quality control review and scrutiny on the overall audit and the outcomes of that audit, and it's a bit more of identifying where the uncertainty may still reside and where do we need to improve. And so this came out of a couple of studies that were led by the Water Research Foundation in the last 10 years, and some interesting things came out of that. One interesting thing was in jurisdictions, this was around 2015, this study came out, in jurisdictions that were collecting water audits from utilities. California, Texas, and Georgia were three of the areas that were studied. They had an unreasonably high percentage of those that were coming in with unreasonable or irrational results, such as negative water loss, ILI close to 0, ILI greater than 20, which in North America is outside of sort of a reasonable range, things like that. And so this sort of pointed to, okay, there's something systematic that is introducing and sort of perpetuating error in our water systems. And so this study set out to identify what is it? What are those things that are causing this? And that led to a follow-on project for essentially the development of a formal validation methodology. And it defined levels of validation, starting with a water audit that has not been through any type of formal validation review. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that the uncertainty has not been reviewed and quantified for the audit. And those are considered self-reported. And then it defined 3 levels, levels 1 through 3, where level 1 involves sort of third-party interaction with summary level records. And level 2 involves data mining and getting to kind of raw data and account level data for further validation. And then level 3 often involves highest level of effort and going to the field, doing things like if supply meters haven't been tested, going and conducting those types of tests, doing field measurements to do bottom-up validation of what's coming from the top-down audit. That methodology defined those and defined what was involved with those types of validation activities. And this manual 5057 is a freely available resource now, and it's now the best practice in North America for level 1 validation. And it includes, again, thinking at a summary level, looking at validation of time intervals, typically on a monthly basis. So if you have an annual audit, looking at monthly volumes of supply and monthly volumes of consumption, but broken down by their constituents. So each supply meter, each class of customer consumption, really getting from a single roll-up number in the top-down audit to at least the monthly bases for how those numbers are coming together. And so that methodology is something that's codified and written out in detail in this level 1 validation manual. There are currently 5 states. Mary Ann showed a map earlier from the 2022 survey. There are currently 5 states that, or 4 US states and 1 Canadian province that require level 1 validation as part of the annual submission of water audits by utilities. And so this is something that is kind of an indicator of kind of where the industry is headed in adoption of these best practices. So that also means that everywhere else on the map that does not have this requirement, those audits that are being turned in are in that self-reported category. And so that leaves a lot of potential error or opportunity for error open. The last thing I'll mention is relative to sort of the state by state trends and sort of the direction that a lot of these methods and the adoption of these practices and how that's headed. There are a number of states, including those that have the regulatory framework, but also including some others that are leveraging their state resources. There is federal funding that comes to each state for water and sewer infrastructure, and they're leveraging, in many cases, those resources to provide assistance to the water utilities within the state through training, through technical assistance, and direct assistance for water loss projects, for water loss reduction. And so this is something that another thing that we watch is it's another measure of how widespread these practices are being adopted when state resources are channeled and being directed to help the utilities within the state, especially if there's not a mandate, a regulatory mandate in that state to do so. I'll mention the same thing that Mary Ann mentioned. If this topic is important to you and you have relevance of this type of information in North America, definitely the place to be would be our biannual event for the North American water loss. All right, McCall, I'll turn it back over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Will. Really appreciate that. And we're going to do questions at the end, but just a very quick question while we wait for Alan to get his slides up. Although it was built for America, the AWWA audit system, that gets downloaded around the world. Am I correct in saying that, Will, that it gets used by other utilities, or people use it at least as a reference?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're able to track where in the world it's being downloaded from. And so that heat map does have places all over. So the answer is yes. And it has a metric units feature in there. So it can be used outside of North America for sure.
Okay, so I don't need to get out my calculator and work what gallons to megaliters are. Okay, that's brilliant.
No, save you that pain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Alan, we're going to pass over to yourself now. Now, I believe you don't like going full screen, do you, Mr. Wyatt? You like showing it like this so we can see it. So, okay. So the first of our case studies from California. Over to you, Mr. Wyatt. We can't hear you, though. Can you come off mute?
Okay.
If not, maybe I
can you see
there
this?
You go.
Okay. I just want to add.
We can see your arrow.
All right. Are we good? I just want to add on that question that you asked about the free water audit software. There was a question in the text or meeting chat box about translation of the free water audit software. And correct me if I'm wrong, Will, it is available in French. Is that correct?
So it is, but the latest version 6 is not. Version 5, which was the prior version from 2014 to 2020, that one was translated to French. It is okay. There's not a French version of the latest currently.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased to be here today. I've spent quite a few years looking at water loss in California, and the drivers that Will mentioned about drought and those factors have been big contributors to the situation in California. You have a great variety of landscapes from the north to the south. So there's different issues in different parts of the state. But as also Marianne said, the water loss regulation program in California is the largest ever in the United States and one of the largest in the world. So I've been investigating sort of how it's going. You know, what are we learning? What are some of the strengths of the program? What are some of the difficulties that would help other states or other countries embarking on such a project? One moment, let's see what's going on here. There we go. Okay, that's my outline. Review quickly some of the challenges, the regulations themselves, the audit process that was undertaken in California, the economic model that was used as part of the regulations, and then show you some analysis that I've done on audits and standards and some preliminary conclusions. The regulatory program is ongoing, so can't say that I can make any definitive conclusions. As I mentioned, California is a diverse state. This map shows 10 hydrologic regions in the state, from the north, which is quite wet, to the south, which is quite dry. And the blue areas here represent the service territories of the urban retail water suppliers. You can see a big band of population from Santa Barbara down to San Diego here in the Bay Area and Sacramento. But the key challenge is that, in simplistic terms, water's in the north and the demand is in the south. I mean, that's oversimplified, but it's very true in the broad sense. The demand is very high. Use of water is very high for many purposes. The supply is highly variable from one year to the next, or several years to several years after that, with droughts and floods. So that's a big challenge. Climate change is expected to reduce the supply by at least 10% by 2040. So overall, it's a water stress, high water stress situation. And so the regulations were put in place with the Senate Bill 555 in 2015, and the stated purpose was supply-side water conservation by the larger urban retail water suppliers to reduce impact from drought and climate change. And that bill stipulated that the legislation have two main areas of attention, or requirements, excuse me. Suppliers shall submit level 1 validated audits, as Will's been talking about, to the Department of Water Resources starting in 2017. And the second part, that the State Water Resources Control Board would adopt regulatory rules requiring suppliers to meet individual volumetric performance standards, that is, targets, for water loss for each water system using full life cycle cost accounting. And those words are relatively important. Anticipated savings, and forgive me, but you can't talk about California without talking about acre feet, but there was quite a range of the estimated savings, somewhere in the range of 100 to 160 million cubic meters a year. Here are some of the key provisions: that a baseline would be determined from audits for 2017 to 2020. That information and a variety of other technical parameters would feed into an economic model developed by the Water Resources Control Board that would define a standard for each water system. Now, the suppliers, at least up until a certain point, can provide system-specific values for most of those parameters. Some do that, some use the defaults. The standards for each system were adopted in April 2024. It's about 450 systems. And each system is required to meet the standard by a compliance assessment conducted during 2028, which covers the period 2025, 26, and 27. And there would be ongoing compliance assessments every 3 years. This is just a sort of a time map. You can see from SB 555, that's 10 years ago. I mean, this is a long process, and a very thorough process with peer reviews and stakeholder meetings. And one that interests me is a scheduled review of the regulation in 2028. And then essentially, is it reasonable? Is it achieving the results desired? Okay. What California did in great strength was to adopt the accepted tools in the free water audit software and the M36 manual. There was an extensive training program, technical assistance program that Will was involved in. Level 1 validation was, as I understand it, tweaked a bit to California, and the American Water Works Association chapter in section in California and Nevada has done the training and certification of validators and provided other ongoing training. There's experienced engineering firms in and working in California. The submission compliance with the audits, according to my calculations, is in the 90s. It's a little lower still on 2023, but I would view this as quite good. DWR, who brings in all the audits, provides lots of information in the sense of audits being available, but also a webinar series for training and data and information exchange. So these are some real strengths of the program. Now, there are some challenges. It's completely understandable that there are some errors that are missed, that slip through. And I've done a lot of sort of hunting to find things like that, but they're inevitable. Another challenge is that different suppliers use different years, a calendar year or a fiscal year. You often have different staff in one year preparing the audit from someone in a different year. So you may get slightly different interpretations or use of different information sets. I mean, this is the reality of the world. Small systems often lack the technical skills and the measuring equipment for accurate audit preparation. And I want to make a distinction here. Will very carefully use the word reliability. Validation gives you reliability. But as indicated in this note from the California TAP training program, validation does not necessarily guarantee perfect accuracy. The best available data is used and verified and validated for its reliability, but there may still be error in some of the measurements. So it's important to understand that fact. A challenge now for California, as I see it, is there is no regulation of the data quality, the bulk measurement accuracy, the customer meter accuracy. A lot of people don't like such an idea, but I think it's important to understand this and think about whether that's the right direction. Maybe in the future, maybe not. Okay, moving to the economic model. And what it calculates is the future unit real loss, let's say gallons per connection per day, if the backlog of unreported leakage is eliminated through classic leak detection surveys and repairs, and then all components of real loss are maintained at a steady state level going out for years into the future. So bring the backlog down. That's what the standard is targeting. However, if the benefits of doing that, that is the value of water saved, are lower than the cost of achieving a standard such as this, then the standard becomes the baseline that was started. In other words, it doesn't make economic sense to bring it down if it doesn't pay for itself. And the model uses a, discounted 30-year time horizon with an avoided cost of water, and et cetera. So it's really important that people understand that's the way it works. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I just want to point out a few things. I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but imagine you have a baseline leakage up here, and these are components of real loss. And the difference between estimated values of those components and the total leakage is assumed to be the backlog, which would be reduced. Now, what you can see here is that there are no economic parameters involved in the calculation of the volumetric standard. You have a whole variety of technical inputs, either defaults or local parameters provided by the suppliers. So just again, understanding what's going on here. Now, what the board decided to do midway through the development of the standards and the economic model was to allow a higher infrastructure condition factor than the unavoidable at 1. And what that did is increase the background leakage, which ended up reducing the water savings. It increased the standard and ended up reducing the water savings. And I think the intent was to make the target a little less difficult at the beginning, as a lot of suppliers were just getting going on this. So again, I'm just trying to present the information on how this works. Now, this does lead to some rather odd results. And I did an analysis of water audits using the defaults, and I found that high pressure systems have low reduction requirements. Low pressure systems have high reduction requirements. And that's a little counterintuitive, but it all has to do with the way the background leakage is done and the kind of mix of top down and bottom up. Similarly, large systems have less reduction requirement than small ones. So if you're a small system with low pressure, you can have a very, very large reduction mandate of 80%, whereas very large systems would have less. And that is I guess you could say, a little perplexing. The other aspect is that the model is very sensitive because of that, the way the water balance is done in the real loss components. It's very sensitive to the baseline real loss and average pressure. And those are factors that come from the audit, which have, let's say, some uncertainty. The real loss using confidence limits has, a fair amount of wobble in it if the accuracy is not superb. So you have a sort of a double whammy of inaccuracy in one place. I'm not saying they're all inaccurate, but it can happen, and that feeds into a sensitive aspect of the model. Okay, now I'm going to shift to showing you some results of analysis of over 4,000 audits that I did, all downloaded from DWR. And by the way, Nirmala at DWR has been very helpful working with me on all of this analysis. This map shows the baseline in orange, the dark blue for 2023, and the green, which is the aggregated standard for each of those 10 hydrologic regions we talked about, or I showed before. You can see way in the north, the volumes relative to the other regions is small. You can also see that the Sacramento River is in 2023 under the standard, under the aggregated standard. That's good news, but the South Coast still has a ways to go. This is just a bar graph of that same parameters, but over time. The baseline in the orange line is from 2017 to 2020. The green line is the aggregated standard. And right away, you can see noticeable improvement in 2021, 22, and 23. And I won't go through the details of the math, but if you do the math, It looks like the projected savings will be a little lower than what was originally anticipated, but there's a number of years to go until compliance happens. So I'm reluctant to spend any time on projections, but I'm going to continue watching this. This is a busy one, but what it shows is for each of the hydrologic regions, the gallons per connection per day moving up and down across 2017 up through 2023. And over here, I have the gallons per connection averaged across the whole state, both in gallons and in liters. So it's getting down to 29 when the target's around 25. These are aggregated entire state numbers. Now, if you do it on a 3-year rolling average, then some clearer trends begin to pop out. Colorado River region, some fairly steady declines. Central Coast is flat, etc. So I think the rolling average is a very useful way of looking at things. The other point I want to make is that the large systems dominate the total real loss. 28 very large systems have a fairly good value of gallons per connection, but still are 42% of the real losses. The very small systems make up a very small percentage of the total losses across the state. Makes me wonder whether it's worth regulating those, but I'll leave that as a question. Skip that one. Okay. This is a time plot, and I'm wanting to look at how things are changing from year to year. And these are two retailers in the South Coast. We have the baseline in orange, the standard in dotted green, and you can see the annual numbers are going down and below the standard in both of these cases. That's great. But with other places, particularly small ones, you get some very erratic real loss trends. And I've done some analysis of the interannual variations, and it appears to be quite a bit higher in California than other parts of the states or the world, excuse me. So this is a concern, the erratic nature. And I think there's a lot of investigation that needs to be done to really pin down why this is happening. And there's probably a variety of reasons in a variety of places. So it's something that needs work. Okay, I'm going to wrap up with some basic conclusions, preliminary though they are. This California program is a huge, huge groundbreaking effort using good tools, collaborative training. Those are all great strengths. The validation is extremely important, but we have to understand that there may be accuracy improvements needed in some places. This interannual variability I talked about is a concern. Should there be regulation of the data quality? I'm not going to give an opinion. I'm raising a question. The model and standards, the model itself is kind of counterintuitive and perplexing. It isn't consistent with economic modeling principles that have been recognized for many years. It calls for reductions in small and large systems or pressure in ways you wouldn't expect. And you get to a mindset where the objective becomes meeting the standard rather than reducing the losses. And that's kind of a paint it dark point of view, but it does happen. There are plenty of suppliers in California that are doing an excellent job focusing on reducing real losses, and we're going to hear from one of them in just a minute. I've talked about the sensitivity and a model review in 2028. The last point is it's too early to really assess what the impact is going to be. The coming years will tell. The real loss is going down. We'll see how it all ends up. A number of suppliers tell me they're much more aware of the benefits of reducing water losses and are going below their standards, but others are kind of going through the motions. Thankfully, there are organizations at the state, regional, and county level which are providing information, training, and technical assistance. So with that, I'll stop. I'm hoping I'm not too far off my time, but I thought I'd show you this funny picture of leak detection in the 1920s on the LA aqueduct. That's a joke, actually. But you can see the size of the pipe for bringing water from the Owens Valley to Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan, and thank you for that lovely picture at the end. Superb on there. Okay, and you've just given us a little bit of a teaser to Matt Collings, who's now going to give us a case study from California about how you're reducing water loss. Matt, it may be good if you could give us a bit of an introduction to yourself, a bit of the background, what your role is, and then give us an overview of the work that you've been doing.
No, happy to. Thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to be able to talk about what we're doing here at Moulton Niguel Water District. My name is Matt Collings. I'm the Assistant General Manager for Moulton Niguel Water District. We're located in Southern California. Let's see if I can get this going. There we go. Yeah, so we're located in Southern California. We are a relatively mid to large size utility for California standards, small on a lot of the global scale. We have about 55,000 service connections. We do have a 7-member elected board of officials that governs our programs and policies. So they are the ones that are establishing our policies and goals as it relates to our water loss control programs and in meeting the state standard compliances. One of the things I did want to note on here, there was a discussion earlier about credit ratings, and we do work really closely with our credit rating agencies as we look at bond issuances to raise funds for capital improvements. We were recently reaffirmed at our AAA credit rating, which did have a factor of our water loss control program from a best management practice. And also wanted to note that we have been fortunate to be rated as a top workplace, both in Orange County for 8 years and the US for the past 5 years. And I think that has a little bit to do with some of the innovative programs that we have in place. I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. We do have a staff that really looks to strive in different ways to put new programs and policies in place. And I think that leads to a workplace culture that really is a very positive environment. So a little bit about where we get our water from at Moulton Niguel. We do not have the benefit of a groundwater basin, so we import 75% of all of our water from the Metropolitan Water District. Again, that's coming from either the Colorado River Aqueduct, about 250 miles away, or from the Northern California Sacramento Delta, a little over 700 miles away. There's a couple reasons that's relevant. One, as it comes to the cost for our water, it is rather expensive compared to a lot of places in the state. So when we look at water loss control, not only does it have the benefit of our supply issues that we see within California and Southern California, but it also has financial benefits as well. The other aspect of this is when we get to the water data validity discussion, as we've heard about earlier from the presenters, it has an impact because Metropolitan Water District supplies our water, and there are limitations when it comes to volumetric testing of those imported water meters. So as Alan presented on the water standards, here's where Moulton Niguel currently is situated from a water supply and water standard point. You can see our 2028 targets on the right-hand side of 26.5 gallons per connection per day. Our last audited standards were 15.8. And then you can see the apparent water loss standards as well. So we have been fortunate enough that we are currently meeting the targets and the standards that we have for our system. But we are continuing to work on ways to further improve that. And I'll show you a little bit more as to how we're efforting those programs going forward. Before I did that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the data validity score as it's been presented. So our last audited numbers in the data validity was at 77. So really positive in terms of how comfortable we are in reporting our water loss numbers and the data validity score. But as I mentioned earlier, there are limits to how high we're going to be able to go as a utility. We will not be able to reach that tier 5 level of data validity because the imported water, our wholesaler who provides us water, does not do volumetric testing of their meters. And that is not because they aren't interested in helping to manage water loss control. Metropolitan Water District has been a very active partner in looking at water efficiency and water loss. The challenge is as Alan's slide indicated, they are dealing with rather large systems with rather large meters. And so the cost to actually volumetric test and in some cases even calibrate those meters is extremely expensive. So there are limitations with regards to the level of validity we can get because of those large imported water meters. So when it comes to water loss audits for the district, you can see this is an image of the district's service area. We, as with all the other California agencies, conduct a water loss audit once a year. It's a district-wide number. The data we provided that I showed you earlier is a district-wide number that is provided once a year. Now, it is a valuable tool. It is a valuable data set, but it is limited in how much actionable information can be ascertained from doing a water loss audit on a once per year district-wide basis. And I'll provide you a little bit of context, a little bit of background as to how our program has sort of evolved into taking a much deeper dive into our water loss. Around the 2016-17 timeframe, the district was noticing a rather substantial year-over-year increase in our water loss numbers. It was alarming in the sense that we did implement a proactive leak detection program that we still have today. And I'll talk a little bit about the effectiveness of that program. But it wasn't really answering questions as to what was driving that increase in water loss. There wasn't significant breaks that we were seeing over the course of those years. There weren't other issues that were driving that increase in our water loss. Yet the number was going up from a percentage basis. I don't have the numbers in the gallons per connection per day, but percentage basis going from 5% to nearly 10% over a 2-year period. As it turns out, our operations department was very uncomfortable with that increase and did a deep dive into our system. And as it turned out, we found an interconnection we had with one of our neighboring water agencies just to the east of us had been opened up and not reported to anybody. And for 2 years, we had supplied them about $2 million worth of water that was driving our water loss up because nobody was reporting or measuring that at the time. Fortunately, we did have the meter running on there, so we were able to reaccount for that, which brought our water loss back into standards that we expected. But it was concerning as to how could that happen, and with all the data and the information we have in our system, how weren't we able to spot that in a much quicker, much more effective way? So I started to challenge our team a little bit on identifying some tools, given the data sets and the data sources that we have, that would really inform that on a much more real-time basis and provide actionable information for us within our system. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we've kind of evolved those programs and where we're looking to go in the near future here. So as I mentioned, we did implement a proactive leak detection team. We have a 2-person team that goes out and reviews and surveys our system on an annual basis through some of our international collaborations with the Danish Water Technology Alliance. We were able to send the team over, and they were trained quite extensively with Lifecock over in Denmark to get some great expertise and training on our leak detection program. And we've seen a substantial reduction in subsurface leaks that have been detected and repaired. We have an ongoing ArcGIS collector system that we track what's been surveyed on an annual basis, what's remaining to be surveyed on an annual basis, and where we're identifying leaks. And all that is maintained within our GIS system and ultimately our computerized maintenance management system that will roll into informing future capital improvement programs. So it's been an effective team, and we continue to look at different ways to expand the areas of detection that they are working on. One of the other tools that we implemented during this time frame was an AMI program. And there's a couple drivers for our advanced metering infrastructure program. And for those of you who aren't familiar with advanced metering infrastructure, I'm sure most of you are, but it is basically a smart metering program for all of our consumption meters. We did implement over a 5-year period a phased rollout of all 55,000 connections are on smart meters. The primary benefit and initial goal for that was engaging and informing customers of water use. It's been an extremely effective tool in bringing awareness to how homeowners are using water on a day-to-day basis. We have over 75% of all of our customers enrolled in the daily portal, receiving and having access to their water consumption on an hourly basis. But it also provides leak alerts for meters that are showing continuous use. Last year alone, we generated over 150,000 different leak alerts to customers so that they can take action within their own residences and businesses to reduce water loss there. But on top of that, it really creates an operational benefit that we're still starting to scratch the surface on. We have all of this data coming in on daily consumption, hourly consumption. How can we integrate this with our other data sources to really better inform our overall water loss control program? And so what we've been doing, and these are some of the data sources that I was speaking of. We have, as I mentioned, we have our AMI data on a time series data, but we have energy data, our SCADA control data, weather data, water quality information, and then combine that with our system data. It creates a lot of opportunity to really integrate these data sources in a way that can inform a lot of operational and actionable decisions. And so when we look at leak insights, what we're currently working on and have developed a dashboard for on a pilot basis, and I'll show that in a moment, is breaking down our water loss into different pressure zones or digital metered areas. What you see on the right is the initial breakdown of the various pressure zones and system areas that we have, and we'll be combining that information to inform water loss in each of those areas on a monthly or weekly basis. So it really begins to create not just a district-wide water loss number, but an opportunity to create actionable information for our leak detection team and for operational decisions and capital investment decisions going forward on a more real-time basis. Essentially how it's going to work, and this is the water loss mass balance equation, but using a number of inputs from our SCADA system of water in, using the water out information from our AMI system, and then combining that with the information we're gathering on known water losses and apparent water losses, we're able to calculate that real loss bit number on a weekly basis. We could get a little bit more granular than that, but we feel at this point weekly and monthly gives us actionable information to really determine where we're going to send our leak detection team, where we need to focus on our capital improvement programs, and what parts of our system may be more concerned than the others. Had we had something like this in place back when we had that open interconnection with one of our neighboring agencies, we would have been able to find that water loss and seen that problem within a week or a month, as opposed to the 2 years it took to finally realize that there was a much bigger problem than we anticipated. This is the dashboard that's currently been developed that kind of shows the different opportunities for tracking water loss on a more focused basis and a real-time basis. It has a number of different factors in here that allows our staff to really make some actionable decisions in moving forward with our leak detection and repair programs. But what this has led to is a much larger enterprise data management program that we're looking at, as we have identified this opportunity through these questions of how do we get more granular with our water loss to create actionable information. What other data opportunities do we have that can really inform our capital planning, streamlining the regulatory compliance? One of the challenges, as we have a number of reporting requirements that we have for water loss, for water supply assessments, for water consumption, is there a way to streamline and automate those regulatory reporting compliances and make more informed decision-making? So through these different programs, not only we looked at a water loss mass balance program, but it's creating opportunity and integration of these data sets to look at water and energy analytics, and inflow and exfiltration of wastewater collection systems. We do manage the wastewater system for our customers' service area as well. So looking at inflow and infiltration issues within the system, condition-based maintenance, pump optimization. There's a number of tools now as we look at integrated data sets with our SCADA, our AMI, GIS, CMMS systems to really better inform not only our day-to-day operations, but the significant capital investment program that we have going forward. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you all for the time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt, for getting up very early and coming and joining us here. I think for a lot of us, we're at normal time of the day, but I know you've got up very early, so we really appreciate that. Okay,
No
so
problem.
we do have some
Happy
time.
to do it.
Good. We do have some time for some questions. I know Mary Ann needs to leave us in a little bit, so I'm going to do the first. Well, she's got 15 minutes with us, so we'll see how questions go on there. So the first question I'd like to kind of put to you, Mary Ann, is you showed on your presentation that we've got out of the states, we've got 27 using regulation, and we've got 23 not using water loss regulation. How do we get those 23 states that aren't using water loss regulation? Is there a carrot? Is there a stick that we can do? Or is it the fact that we'll run out of water if we don't? What are your thoughts on there, Mary Ann?
Well, thanks for that question, and I'd love to have Will and Alan's opinion on this as well. But what we have been doing so far is a lot of personal network lobbying. The American Water Works Association has chapters in the states, and they have been very active in working with their local regulators to make some of these standards happen. So members of the Water Loss Control Committee are delegated out into the chapters to help work with them to promote these concepts and getting them into state law and state policy. In terms of incentives, we find in the United States that there's lots more money for energy than there is for water. Water is considered a state issue, so there isn't the kind of federal investment that you could use as a very serious carrot. That said, those utilities that apply for money from the state revolving funds under the Environmental Protection Agency are often examined as to their level of water loss when they are applying for that money. So that is one sort of carrot/stick that can be applied, but it isn't a big one. I mean, mostly it's selling the business case to the water utility that these methods will save them money and will improve the efficiency of their performance. So it is a good one to take to the regulators as well. I just want to make a comment that in the United States, it's not like the UK where everybody's privatized. You know, 2/3 of the water systems in the United States, 2/3 of the water delivered by water systems in the United States are delivered through public community water systems. Only investor-owned companies supply maybe, you know, 25% to 1/3 of the water. So those private companies are regulated by public utility commissions in states, and they have been also tasked with requiring these new methods. So there's another way to get at that as well. Will, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll just add a quick comment, Mary Ann. It is a state by state issue. So in my segment, I mentioned different drivers: drought, financial drivers, bond ratings, PR. There was one in the state of Tennessee. There is a regulation now, and the reason there is it was a rate case where one single water utility did a drastic increase to their water rates. And there was someone who was politically connected in that district, and they brought that to the state legislature and ultimately elevated it, the issue politically, and that ended up resulting in a statewide requirement for water auditing and looking at system efficiency and that kind of stuff. So it really varies state by state. And so all that to say, it will depend on which of those drivers or which combination of those drivers are most acute in a specific state. Area.
Yep.
I do think, if I can add to this, there is an opportunity to integrate the value of water loss into future capital investments as well. Agencies are going to spend billions and billions of dollars replacing infrastructure, and the cost of that and the value of that will be benefited by water loss programs that are utilizing and making efficient use of systems and where to invest those dollars. So I think also incorporating future capital investments as part of water loss control will help to further that along as well.
Excellent.
And I guess, does that build on the work that's been done looking at carbon emissions? Because essentially what we're saying with carbon emissions, if I understand correctly, Will, and you mentioned this a bit, that actually as we lose water, we're losing energy as well, essentially, aren't we? You know, the more water we have to produce or clean or put into the system, the more carbon we're using. So I guess, does that build on Matt's point that actually there's a business case, and it's not just a water business case, there's a power, there's an energy water case as well?
Yeah, 100%. And that's really, I'd say, the hope of the Leakage Emissions Initiative is to better establish that relationship so that the carbon impacts and the business case or the incentive for leakage reductions is increased just across the board. But right now it's all optional. There's not an existing state mandate in North America that ties water loss reductions on account of carbon reductions, but that's definitely the hope, that folks will see that as the increased incentive to do so.
So
Okay,
if I can
brilliant.
add to that, if
Go
I
on,
can just
Mary
add
Ann.
to that, the issue I mentioned, I think earlier, that there's a lot more money for energy and energy efficiency. It is a very cheap way to reduce carbon to do it through the water systems. In California, the data show that it was more cost effective for state money to go toward funding the water utilities in their drought conservation programs, because it was saving so much energy in California. It's a very energy intensive water supply in California. So it depends on the level of energy intensity that you have. But energy money should pay water utilities to do their water loss programs and help decarbonize. I mean, it's a source of possible funding too. So we're hoping that might be an incentive as well.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, here's a question for you, Will, that was put in the chat. It says, I've heard some people mention that the AWWA FWAS was not designed for smaller water systems. Is it documented somewhere that it is still useful for small systems? And a second question is, are the bond ratings for only a certain size systems?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. So it's applicable for systems of all sizes, and I think the M36 manual says as much. And there is a specific chapter in the M36 manual that is called Considerations for Small Systems. And in that chapter, it sort of dives into, if you are a small system and you're using the free water audit software, the FWAS, as some folks like to call it, then here are some things to consider, and maybe some special corner cases that you may run into, but still nonetheless, the concept of a water balance is universal and applies to a system with one connection and a system with 1 million connections. So that concept is universal. Where you get on the fringes is, okay, well, how does that shake out into volume per connection per day and some of those types of things? And that's addressed in the that considerations for small systems. So we always encourage systems of any size, do the annual water audit, do the water balance. That's a best practice no matter what. As far as bond ratings, there's not a formal low limit in terms of size. In practice, small towns and cities may not get bond ratings often. It kind of depends if they're going to the bond market to borrow money. That's sort of, so there's not a universal answer to that. So some smaller cities may be rated, may have a bond rating, and some may not.
Okay, and a very specific question then, because I think you mentioned the AWWA conference next month. So the question is, how is the new version 6.1 going to be rolled out by then? What's the mechanism for that?
Yeah, it'll be published on the AWWA website where the current audit software is available. It'll be essentially posted there with some announcement language, and there may be an email that goes out at some point. But For now, we're going to be sort of announcing it live at the conference, which is happening week after next. And that's all that's planned for now, is it'll just be out there, and by word of mouth, the word will get around that it's now available for use.
Okay, thank you. Alan, I think you want to come on this. Alan Wyatt.
Yeah, I just wanted, there was the question about small systems, and it's a good question, but it made me think that, reflecting a little bit on what Matt was saying about decomposing the system into pieces. I mean, there's nothing to say that you couldn't use the free water audit software on sections of your network if you can either digitally or physically isolate various areas and get much more granularity on the data. It's not easy, but it's possible. The other thing that's related to that, I know at least one person in Tennessee who does the free water audit software every month because they want to see how things are moving and when they should respond to the situation. So it's not a just do it once a year and stick it on a shelf, you know.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Matt, we've got a couple of questions for you on here. Again, some quite specific questions we got here. So how much water is contributed for flushing in the network? And also, is it part of water loss? And have there been reductions over the years by achieving efficiency? So talk about flushing. Do you flush your network? Do you take account for that water?
So we've gone back and forth on kind of what you would call our flushing program. We do have what are our reservoir management maintenance systems, so we are able to keep residual within our system by managing that through our maintenance management system without having to flush. We took a big step back on our flushing program during the droughts in the 2010 timeframe. As a result of that, we shifted and are basically targeting flushing by filling up our Vector trucks to clean our wastewater system. So we go to different hydrants and clean our wastewater system using the flushing into our Vector trucks. That is accounted for, so it is not considered real loss. We do account for it. It is part of our operational use, and it is metered and measured as we are filling our trucks. That has evolved more recently, though. With the result of the LA fires, there has been an increased desire to see hydrants tested and inspected and flushed per the AWWA standards more. So we are back to opening and running water for hydrant exercising and testing, but again, accounted for, measured, and incorporated into our water loss calculations.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. On the chat, you'll see that there are some comments there, not necessarily questions, but comments there. Alan Lambert talks about the system correction factor for smaller areas, for smaller zones. A shout out to Texas for the good work that they've done. In fact, Mark, you want to come in on this. So Mark, you got your hand raised. Tell us a little bit about Texas.
Yeah, I just want to make sure y'all could see me.
We can see you and we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to I put in the chat our new water loss dashboard that is available for everyone to look at, and the link is there. I'm not going to really say much because I want people to go in and look at it themselves. But, this year we're in the middle of our validation program, our first year, and it's moving along quite nicely. Everybody's doing well, and the utilities are quite receptive to the validation process. So that's where Texas is, and thanks to Mary Ann and Will for doing a shout out for us, and also Alan. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. And well done. Good work that's going on in Texas and moving forward. There's a question here from Clive Harrison. I'm not sure who wants to take it, but one of you can, hopefully. Why is the EPA not mentioned as a player in municipal water loss? control.
Marianne, I
Once
nominate
we
you. I nominate you
Yes,
to take.
I second the nomination.
Thanks, Clive. Okay, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is in the process of having its budget greatly reduced by our current president, has always expressed interest in water loss control for the water utility systems that it regulates for water treatment and water quality purposes. So system water loss has been something that the EPA has looked at, and it is making a big issue when they issue grants and loans for water treatment facilities. But it is not a topic area per se that is regulated by EPA. It is not like AWWA in the UK. We don't have an AWWA in the United States. It's done at the state levels. And so the role of EPA has always been to support those state efforts and to support regulation where it occurs in the Public Utility Commission world, and to support applicants who are applying for EPA incentive money. And we would love to see more work. They have done research reports and evaluations, but it's not clear going forward how much of that will continue.
Okay, thank you, Marianne,
just-
for taking that question. Go on, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there is another player that is not high profile, but quite important, which is the Water Research Foundation. Will mentioned the validation guidelines, and they've done research and other programs working with states. So they are important in the US picture.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
Could I just get a view just to see if I've understood what I've heard? I think in all four presentations today, this is the picture that I'm getting. And I know, Marianne, if you need to drop off, please do. Okay, essentially, where we've got a way to audit, and where that audit is done well, level 1 validation and things like that, it does result somewhere down the line of water loss reduction. Is that a fair estimation, or is that too simplistic? That actually water audits done well relate to water reduction on there. Is that fair? Can we say that these water audits that have been now going for 25 years or thereabouts actually do have a result in less water being lost in California and other areas?
I'll go first and say that qualitatively, I think the answer is yes. And the reason is that awareness drives behavior. And if it's something that folks are not paying attention to and they're not measuring, then it's not going to go down on its own. The variable comes in is to, okay, an audit doesn't reduce any loss. You have to take action after the audit. You have to have programmatic things that you're doing. But I think that it's fair to say that the best practice of auditing and validation drives increased levels of programmatic activity, which does reduce.
With one caveat, assuming those results are widely shared. If the audit results are not reported to anyone or shared publicly, if it's kept inside management, and if management decides that they're not going to do anything at this time, then it doesn't help. But that's not what we're finding, as you point out. But having as much daylight on the results of the audits as possible is a very useful tool, because then there are a lot of people who take a look at them and say, we ought to be doing more here. And that helps as well for the investment.
Well, if I could just add that I agree with Will and Marianne, but two things. There's some issues about the California regulations, which I think could use some work. But it's clear from my conversations with suppliers around the state that the regulation has greatly raised awareness. Not everywhere, but oh, what is that? We got to start paying attention to that, That said, there are small systems, and there's a lot of teeny systems in California and other states in the United States where there are other issues that in some way are in front of water loss, like water quality compliance. I mean, there's a lot of very small systems that have significant water quality issues. So yes, the audits and the awareness are critical, but there's still some challenges here. There really are.
So I just want to kind of relate to one thing that you put in you put a question, Alan, about data quality. And is the data quality good enough? Now, when we look at Matt Collings, you're on tier 4, so you've got a really high data quality. What was the thing that was driving you? Because it feels like some people aren't too worried about data quality. They've got a number, they put it in there, fine, move on. But what we see in California, Matt, what we see in your corporation essentially is that you want good data quality on there. The tier 4 is representative of that. What drives you for good data quality when maybe other organizations aren't as driven?
Well, it's hard to speak for other organizations, but for our standpoint, good data drives good decisions. Right? This isn't a compliance tool. I mean, there's a compliance requirement, but for us, it's driving decisions on where our staff goes, where we're spending resources, where we're looking at capital investments. So without good data, we're going to make bad decisions at the end of the day. And so I think that's what drives us to make sure that we're as accurate and as consistent as we can be with the data that we are gathering.
Okay, that's absolutely brilliant. Mark, I see that you've got your hand up. I don't know if that's from last time, if it didn't come down, or whether you want another shout out for Texas. Oh no, it's down on there. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Final words, very quickly. We'll go to Alan Wyatt, we'll go to Will Jernigan, and then we'll go to Matt. Just give us a couple of words, really, a sentence or two, on where you think in the future, in the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, where we're going to see water loss in America. Are we going to continue to see this downward trend? Are we going to see more states following these auditing rules or these auditing guidelines, really? What we're going to ask you to look in the crystal ball. Alan, we'll get you to do that first.
Well, I'm an optimistic person, and I think, yes, things will expand, better techniques and methods be more adopted in more states. Will had that map of all sorts of other states that have done pilot programs. So I'm optimistic. On to you, Will.
I'll offer this forecast that we have very clearly, in my opinion, moved from the early adopter portion of the curve into the mainstream portion of the curve. I think that's where we are now. So it's got its sort of critical mass of momentum, and regulation helps that in terms of speed because it takes a state at a time and moves things. But I think it'll be a combination of new states perhaps taking on or improving existing regulation. But I think it'll also be other parts of the North America where it's voluntary adoption, just because this has now become, as Matt was describing. Matt, I think you did a really good job of saying good information drives good decisions. This is just good business. It's just a good way to run a utility. And I think that's going to also become more and more of the driver. So that's where I think it's headed.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to build on what Will was saying there. Utilities and utility management going forward, we're all going to be pressed with doing more with less, whether that's less resources from a water supply standpoint, from a capital funding standpoint, from a human resource standpoint. We have to do more with less, and that's going to drive data into informing decisions. It has to. And I think what water loss regulations and what the water loss standards are doing is it's pushing the need for good, valid data to drive decisions. And that's going to funnel into a whole bunch of other areas of utility management. So I also am optimistic that we're going to see that going forward, because we don't have a choice. We just have to figure out how to do more with less.
Excellent. And with your corporation, Matt, you're already ahead of the curve, from the data that you've given us. That's right. Brilliant. Okay, so
can I mention
great to end on a positive note, but Alan, you want to get one more positive in, so share it with us.
All right, very quickly. I think that one important factor to encourage is communication peer-to-peer between utilities. Like other organizations, people learn from others that are doing interesting things, more so than a salesman offering something. So I think conferences, state associations, those kind of things can play an important role. Chris Luber in Tennessee has told me many times about how the utilities in that state, and I'm sure it's true in others, you know, they learn and talk to each other and try things, you know, from sharing. And I think that's an important thing to consider and encourage for making progress.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we join the crowd, and as Will said, you know, it looks like we're the early adopters. We're past that stage now. We're on to kind of this now becoming more normal on there. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you for your time today. As Gary put into the chat, a big thank you for the early risers. It's been an absolutely wonderful webinar. Thank you for being so candid in your questions and in your answers. And have a great rest of your day. Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.